So it's Jesus' final week. He's on his way to the cross where he will die for the sins of the world and be resurrected the third day. He's on his way to the cross to make a way of forgiveness and salvation for mankind. It's the Jewish feast of Passover. They're in Jerusalem during Passover. The population of Jerusalem increased from 600,000 people to 2 to 3 million people that made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. And so he's in the middle of this. He's in the middle of this final week on his way to the cross here. Verse 23 says, let me turn the page back. Now, when he came into the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people confronted him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority?" So Jesus came into the temple. This was likely Tuesday morning of the Passion Week. I have a picture for you, I think, if you can bring up that picture for me. This is a model of the temple that my sons and I made during the COVID lockdown. The puzzles just got boring, and so we needed something a little bit more challenging, so why not build a scale model of ancient Jerusalem in the backyard? So this is what the temple looked like in the days of Jesus. Now, the Temple Mount covers about 35 acres. It's huge. And you can see the little columns that are on the perimeter of the courtyard. That's a covered portico that went all the way around the courtyard of the temple. During the Feast of Passover, the courts of the temple, the big courts are the courts of the Gentiles, it would be filled with tens of thousands of people. And under those covered porticos that you see with the pillars there, rabbis would teach their students under those covered porticos. Solomon's porch, which is mentioned several times in the book of Acts, is under one of those covered porticos there. And so that's where this is likely taking place. Under that covered portico around the courts of the temple. Again, there's tens of thousands of people jammed into those courts during Passover. And look at verse 23 again. Try to picture this scene. You can leave that picture up there for me. You try to picture this scene. Jesus was teaching in the temple courts under one of those covered porticos. There were thousands of people in the courts of the temple. They're gathered around Jesus. They're listening to him teach. Luke's account says, listen to this. Luke's account says the people hung on every word that he said. I bet they did. One day we will be with Jesus, and the Bible says that he will teach us. And we will sit and we will listen to Jesus teach, and we will hang on every word. So this crowd is there hanging on every word that Jesus said. You can imagine everyone standing real still, trying to be quiet, listening carefully to his words, concentrating so they can hear him. When suddenly the chief priests and the elders confronted him. They interrupted him while he was teaching. They interrupted him while he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a church service that was suddenly interrupted by someone. But it's pretty startling, pretty unsettling. And in this case, it wasn't some, demon-possessed person that interrupted Jesus. It was the religious leaders of Judaism that interrupted Jesus as he was teaching and said, "Hey, by what authority do you do these things? And who gave you this authority to do this?" And you can imagine those in the audience were probably pretty shocked by this. Whoa, the religious leaders in their robes, the religious leaders confronting him right here, right now, in front of everybody, all these people. And I'm sure some in the crowd are thinking, man, what is the deal? What's going on? Why are the religious leaders so upset with Jesus? Now, remember, the religious leaders were plotting how they might destroy Jesus. And here what they do is they attempt to publicly discredit and humiliate Jesus by confronting him in front of everyone in the temple. And this will backfire badly on the religious leaders. I don't mean to sound like a Sunday morning quarterback here, but you're never going to box in Jesus, right? You're never going to publicly humiliate him and make him look foolish in front of a crowd. That's never going to happen. It's just a dumb idea on the part of the chief priests and the elders. They question his authority in front of everyone. By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you the authority to do this? And they're not just talking about teaching here. You know, Jesus healed people, he cleansed lepers, he delivered people from demonic possession, he raised the dead back to life, he forgave sins and declared that people's sins were forgiven. He cleansed the temple just a couple days before this, and now he's teaching in the temple, and they ask, by what authority do you do these things? Everything now is coming to a head. They're going to crucify him in just a few days. And so now there's this confrontation. By what authority do you do these things, and who gave you this authority? Now the chief priests and the elders, they were the authority in Judaism. And they didn't authorize Jesus to do these things. They didn't authorize Jesus to teach in the temple. They didn't give him permission to teach. And so Jesus responds to their question in verse 24. It says, but Jesus answered and said to them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. So he's willing to answer their question about his authority, but they've got to answer a question from him first. And really, the answer to his question tells where his authority comes from. He says in verse 25, the baptism of John, where was it from? From heaven or from God or from men? And so Jesus asked the question, who authorized John the Baptist? Who authorized John the Baptist? Was John's authority from heaven or was John's authority from man? Was John's authority from God? Or was John's authority from man? Now, if you're taking notes, John chapter 1, verse 6 says, John was a man sent from God.